This past weekend, the University of South Carolina and Gamecock Basketball honored the 50th anniversary of Frank McGuire and the 1971 basketball team that won the ACC Championship and went on to be the first South Carolina team to ever play in the NCAA tournament. Frank McGuire and these teams actually put basketball on the map of the state of South Carolina. That they impacted me as a young player to want to play. I grew up wanting to be a NASCAR stock car driver, that I loved racing. But after seeing these guys, I did not miss a South Carolina basketball game anytime they played on TV. John Roach, their All-American guard, was one of my idols. I always tried to get number 11 every time I played, and even when he went to the NBA, or ABA, with the New York Nets, he became 13. Then 13 became my lucky number. But John Roach, Tom Owens, Tom Riker, John Reebok, Bobby Carver, Rick Idlett, Casey Manning, these all became household names in the state of South Carolina. Frank McGuire had an influence on me that when I started playing basketball at 6 years old, that I wanted to be a basketball player, and basketball became a big part of my life. After playing basketball for many years, I became a college and high school coach for 37 years. Then after getting out of coaching, I went into broadcasting and writing about college and professional basketball. I won't forget, after watching some of the celebrations this weekend, I won't forget the first time that I ever met Frank McGuire. I was a young assistant coach at USC Upstate, and we had the opportunity of playing a doubleheader with the Gamecocks. We came down to play the first game that night against, at that time, USC Coastal versus USC Spartanburg. The second game was South Carolina Gamecocks taking on William and Mary. And we got there early for our game, and I was wandering around the Coliseum taking everything in, having grown up being a huge Gamecock basketball fan. And lo and behold, I ran into Frank McGuire. And I'll never forget how nice he was that Coach McGuire invited me to come and sit in his office and talk with him. He showed me a lot of the things in his office, his plaque for his 500th win, the different awards that he'd gotten for National Coach of the Year, and just all the pictures and all the plaques of memorabilia he had in there. Just, I was in seventh heaven, to say the least. And we sat and talked. He talked to me about the basketball players at South Carolina, the guys that I had grown up watching play and wanted to be just like. He even shared with me the battles he had had with the politicians in Columbia who were trying to run him off as coach. At that time, there were battles between football and basketball. I know that well. And they were trying to actually ship Coach McGuire to be the athletic director at USC Coastal, which was a branch university at the University of South Carolina. But he was smart enough to not let that happen, though. I'll never forget the final words that Coach McGuire ever said to me that day as I was leaving his office, that he wished me good luck and told me if he could ever do anything to help me, to please let him know. As a young coach, you can imagine how I felt with that, though. And again, even to this day, Frank McGuire is still one of my coaching legends. I had the opportunity to talk with Frank Martin, the current coach at USC right now, and ask him what was the importance or what was the impact that Frank McGuire had on basketball in the state of South Carolina, not only at South Carolina, but statewide at all the schools in South Carolina, and the players that he coached. And you will hear his response coming up in just a minute, though. But just a great weekend to go back and think back and reminisce about the glory days of the Fighting Gamecocks. Sit back and listen to what Coach Martin had to say about what he thinks what South Carolina basketball team of 50 years ago and Frank McGuire have meant to basketball in the state of South Carolina.
The Cox?
Frank, I know tonight was an important night in the history of basketball at South Carolina as you had the opportunity to honor the ACC Championship of 50 years ago. And I know Frank McGuire and that team inspired me to be a basketball player and to go on and be a college and high school coach for 37 years in this state and now cover basketball. What do you see this team, what does this team mean and Frank McGuire mean to basketball in the state of South Carolina?
Yeah, it's it's one of the greatest honors that I've ever had is, K-State, where I first got my first job. We had, Lon Kruger, Cotton Fitzsimmons, Jack Gardner, Jack Hartman, Hall of Fame guys. And then when I leave and I come here, I've got, again, Hall of Fame guys, Frank McGuire. And I've gotten to coach at two universities that have had incredible people. Coach McGuire is incredible. One of my greatest joys as a basketball coach is getting to know the Dunleavys, getting to know Kevin Joyce, getting to, getting around Casey Manning and just seeing the pride that those guys had from their days wearing the uniform here. It's one of the things that, at the end of my first year, I said, why don't we have a Legends Weekend? And I was told, well, we did that. I said, when? And they said, well, we had a 100-year celebration a couple years ago. And I said, and no one ever does that anymore? I said, well, we're changing that because celebrating the history of the program is the best way to keep former players, present players, and your community connected. And we had dropped the ball there as a university, and then we started that my second year. And it's been one of the great things is being around all those guys that you just mentioned, and the winning and the responsibility that me and our players have to make sure that we make those guys proud because we got things a lot better than they did back then. It's part of the responsibility to show our players that this school's been number one in the country. This school's won conference championships. It was a big push for me when I had Sindarish and those guys here. Obviously, right now this year, I'm not going to say there's a disconnection there, but that all the things we talked about before, we've allowed some stuff to creep in there that's not allowing us to embrace that responsibility that we have as well as we need to. But Bobby Cremins, Frank McGuire, Dennis Powell, just keep going. Donnie Walsh. It's the people that were a part of this university are just Hall of Fame guys, and I can tell you I take a lot of pride in the fact that I get to represent the same school all those guys represented.